Well, pressure's on. It's the final open event of the season. We're here on the Hudson River. It's mid-October, and I'm in fourth place to make the Classic. They're going to take 5 anglers to the Classic. I'm in fourth place, and this is the final day of practice. It's been a very difficult practice, but I feel like I've found some good things. I found a couple of areas down on the southern part of the river, about 25 miles south of takeoff, that I don't get a lot of bites, but when I do, I get some 2 and 3 pounders, even have 1 4-pounder one day to practice. I'm cranking a little crankbait around rock points, and the tide moves around the points, and when the tide gets right, you get a bite every now and then. You kind of run the tide. But it's a very sporadic deal, and it's got me a little nervous. So what I'm doing today is I'm heading upriver just a little ways so that I can try and take advantage of the smallmouth, because there's a lot more smallmouth population north of the takeoff, and it sure would be nice to have a backup, because about mid-morning the tide's going to get really bad. It's going to be coming in down there. It'd be nice to be able to run upstream 40 or 50 miles and catch an outgoing tide. I'm going to lose a lot of fishing time, but it may be the difference between getting that last 1 or 2 fish and not getting them, because when the tide gets bad down there, you don't get a bite. The whole key to tide fishing everywhere I've been on this river has been to be in the eddy currents. The fish are not in the grass beds like they normally are. Normally this time of year when you come here, the fish are 1 or 2 places. They're in the grass really good, or they're in the backs of the creeks. And we've had an extremely warm fall. September's been very warm here, temps in the 80s, and until just this little cold snap, we haven't had any cool weather at all. So the water's above 70 degrees, and it takes about 62, 63 degrees before they start migrating the creeks. So while there are some fish in the creeks, I still think the majority of the bigger fish are out on the main river, and I've pretty much eliminated going into the creeks. I'm going to fish this tournament in the river. The other thing is, the local tournaments have not been taking a lot of weight to win. I would say 7 to 8 pounds is a decent catch. A 10-pound catch is a big catch. And my first day of practice, I would have had about 12 and a half pounds of largemouth. So, you know, I'm on the right kind of fish if there were just some more numbers. You know, any tournament's got a good amount of pressure. I mean, you always need to perform, but this one has an extreme amount of pressure because of the fact that I'm right there knocking at the door, you know, and I've been the first and second guy out of the Classic so many times. I've been just right there, and this is one I just want to lock down. I want to put the icing on it, man. I've had a good solid season. I finished 11th at the Potomac. I finished 26th at Thousand Islands, had a good finish there. And I think a top 20 here will do exactly what I need to do. One of the things that I've noticed is the point spread's really tight. And so there's about 8 to 10 guys that have a really good chance of making the top 5. Much deeper than about 12th place in the field. And I don't think, unless a lot of guys really mess up, I don't think anybody else can really make it. So it's a 12-man race is basically what it is. I got to beat 12 guys. But first I got to beat the fish. You know, this will be the first time in Bassmaster history where a guy could theoretically make the Classic. 5 guys will make the Classic 7 months before the Classic event. And you could, from my perspective, I mean, I can only imagine what it would be like to be able to go out there and fish the tour starting in January and fish it with reckless abandon, basically fish every tournament to win, or to make money rather than just to try and be conservative and try and make the Classic. And I think a lot of us, me included, you know, play it conservative a lot of times to try and make the points for every tournament are so critical to try and make the Classic. If I could make it in this open tour, I mean, it would just not only make your life just so much more comfortable, but really allow you to fish a lot better. I'm positive of that. You know, typically, to win a tournament, you have to take some gambles, and you have to be willing to be a hero or a zero. And when you're fishing for points, you're not really willing to take those chances. But a lot of times, if you didn't have those points to worry about, if every tournament was an individual tournament and you're just going out there to try and win every one, you could go to areas that you may only get 4 or 5 bites a day, but they would be 4 or 5 big bites. You take those kind of chances where you just normally wouldn't do that if it was a situation where you're fishing for points. And that, to me, would just be a great, great feeling. I would probably have the best season I've ever had if I could just make this classic here and just have no pressure. Not to mention the fact I can't even imagine just going through the holidays and just knowing that I have it done. The marketability of having, knowing 7 months in advance that you're going to be in the classic. Your sponsors are going to be happy. Prospective sponsors are going to be looking at that. And it's just a good situation all the way around. And I'm talking myself right into being even a little more nervous than I already am.
Don't.
One of the primary patterns for the Hudson River is typically drain-throughs. You'll get these riprap banks, or, basically it's a railroad that runs along both sides of the river, and you have culverts with drains, bays in behind them. And when the water drops, those culverts drain out, and you get a lot of current coming out of them. Those fish will sit right out in front. I have cranked the mouth of 25 culverts and yet to have a bite. And maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe I need to be throwing a slower moving bait, but usually I can catch them cranking, and it has not been the deal. I've also realized that there are lots of boats doing it. Every culvert that I go to, I can sit for a little bit and watch, and there'll be 2 or 3 guys systematically work through them. So maybe they're just getting pounded. But I don't see the amount of boat traffic and fishing pressure on these points and these little riprap banks near deep water that I've been seeing in the culverts. There's a good one, big fish. Pull that sucker right on that edge of that riprap, right with it. That's a nice one too. I haven't been getting very many bites on these little riprap points down here on this lower river, but when I do, they're nice fish, nice healthy fish. And I just wonder if I could run enough of them with the tide right, if I couldn't catch a good stringer. In this tournament, as tough as it's going to be, if I can just get, 4 of these and then 1 nice kicker and get myself up around 10 pounds, I know that 10 pounds a day is going to be probably the top 10 the way that the tournaments have been shaken out. The key is to be able to catch that tide to where the eelgrass lets me fish the bait, and then to get the bait bouncing off these rocks, and the fish are just in the eddy current on this down tide or just on the incoming tide. They're in the eddy current. When that crankbait bounces off, they eat it. It's it's slow, but it has been pretty steady. When I fish the right tide, I get several bites every time the tide changes. And I think that might be a pretty good pattern. And there's not a ton of boats doing it down this lower river. I think a lot of the boats are fishing upriver. The downside is the tide is short-lived. You're going to get about 2 hours of good tide, and then I'm either going to be forced to run to catch the good tide or to wait it out and try and catch a little bit of outgoing, but there's not going to be much outgoing in this tournament. The crankbait seems to be the bait. That's what they want, a little crankbait. But this eelgrass, when the tide comes in and then starts back out, this eelgrass just gets everywhere, and you're just constantly slapping it off your bait. And it eddies. Where the current eddies is where the grass stacks up, and that's where the fish are. And that's been the hardest thing, is to get your bait in without being all fouled up. Seems like 4 out of 5 casts into a good spot will get fouled. And then the one cast that doesn't get fouled is the one where you get the bite. If you're not in that little eddy spot at the mouth of these marinas or off these points, you don't get bit. The tide's got to be flowing. Right now it's low, and it's outgoing. It's a really good time to be here. He knocked the far out of that thing, and he didn't get it. Today's Team Outdoor Channel tip has to do with tying that all-important knot. You know, in bass fishing, I try to stay away from snaps, swivels, and leaders, and always tie direct to my bait. But you know, you could have the best line and the best lure, but if you don't have your knot tied properly, the system just doesn't work. I've found that the best knot for me is the Palomar knot. Quick, efficient, and very simple. Typically, the way the Palomar knot is tied is to pull the line through the eyelet, bring out 18 inches of line, and turn and bring the line back through. Pinch the line between your thumb and forefinger here, creating a loop in the line there. One overhand, just like you're going to tie your shoe, creates a hole here. Then you will pull that bait through the hole, never letting go of those first two pieces. Always wet it a little bit because monofilament line will burn if it's kept dry. Cinch it down, and then take a pair of clippers and cut off the excess very tight, within 1/8 of an inch. A good knot will have no slippage. There you have it. The Palomar knot, the best knot for your bass fishing.
In 1912, L.L. Bean founded his...
Yeah, I slipped down just a little bit from this point, but you know, I've actually been able to catch them within, as long as I'm within about 40 or 50 yards of the point, it seems like I can catch them. Once you get too far from the point or the mouth of the bay, you don't get. There he is. That's a good one there. Man, that's a nice one. Oh, that's a good small. That's a good big largemouth. Oh man, that is what I need. Oh man, that is what I need in this tournament right there. That will go a long way in this tournament. I mean, that's two fish within about 50 yards of each other. I caught the one right next to the point, and then I just went down a little ways. I know that it's so tide oriented. It is just so tide oriented. Everything I'm doing here. But you know what? As long as you can figure that tide out, and stay with it, if I could just have a couple of these a day, man, that'd be good. Toughest fishing fin, that'd be good. Just gorgeous fish, man. You know, good 2 3/4 to 3 pound fish. That will work. I guarantee you, that'll work. I found out also, too, on the first day of practice, if I were on real flat points, whether they had riprap or not, I didn't get bit. But when I get to where I'm like in 7.5, 8 foot of water, about a half a cast off the bank, that's what the fish wanted, so they can move up vertically. As that tide raises and lowers, they can move up and down with it, and that has been a critical issue too. There's not a ton of little points like that. You know, the other thing I found out too is a lot of times these fish will hit up on deflection. If I can reel it down by a piling or a rock off the edge of one of these points or one of these riprap banks, just that deflection is usually what generates the strike. It'll bounce off and then the fish will hit it. And almost every fish I've caught has been like that. I've caught a couple of really nice fish off of barges, old barges, when the tide's gotten right. I've fished a couple old barges and you have a lot of current moving through it, but then there's like dead pockets. And if you can bounce that crankbait off the barges, you get a bite. You don't get that many bites. I'd be very fortunate to get 5 bites a day doing this. But if you got 5 a day, you could very easily have 10 to 14 pounds, which would be huge. Grass on the line. There's one. A nice one too, man. He was right on. Same kind of thing. Exactly the same kind of thing. Right there. You know, they fight. How skinny that fish is. The fish is just, look at the razor blade. Like there's something wrong with him. You need to eat more, boy. You need to eat my lure day after tomorrow is what you need to do. You know, I've been fishing almost 2 full days, and this is probably the best area I've seen. I've caught 2 off of the different points and caught 1 off the stretch of riprap right here. This is pretty solid for as slow as the fishing been. I got pretty good feeling about this area. I think this is the kind of place that you could finish in the top 10 to just get the right things to happen. But you know what? I fished through a couple of these areas when the tide was high. I never had a bite. Liked the looks of them. Came back this afternoon now as the tide's getting out and catch them. So it's going to definitely be a low tide deal. Oh, there he is, right at the boat, man. Short line me. It's a big fish right here, man. Oh, that's a nice one. Oh, this is what I need. Oh, that's a nice fish. Man, beautiful fish. Oh, yeah. Man, I'm finally starting to get this thing figured out. Man, oh, man. I was on a non-tidal water where I wasn't worried about the tide getting a little worse every day. I would think I had it dialed in. But I know how short a period of time it is. Just the last hour and a half, you know, I just get that tide down to where those rocks are exposed. Just in that last hour and a half, I've had 4 really nice ones, you know, just cranking these little points in little riprap areas. So I've just got to map it out to where it works to my advantage in the tournament. What you have to remember about tide is it gets an hour later every day. And see, it's after 2 o'clock right now. So really, by the second day of the tournament, I wouldn't be able to fish this under the right tide. The tide would be actually 4 o'clock. And you know, you got to think about that too. So that's always an issue. You know, some days you just shouldn't get out of bed. And this day 1 of the Hudson River Tournament couldn't have gone any worse. You know, I talk about the tide and how critical it is to be in the right place at the right time. And if you get out of sequence, it's just like your whole day just doesn't go right. And that's what happened today. 2 little fish is all I had to show for today's efforts. I'm in 116th place, and I've got 1 more day before they cut to 50. So unless I have an outstanding performance tomorrow, I'm going to get cut, and there goes all the hopes of making the Classic. I'm going to have to stay on the largemouth pattern, forego the smallmouth totally. I'm guessing probably 10 to 12 pounds tomorrow just to be able to make the cut to have a chance to play the final day. I don't know. I just don't know.
Angler on Tour will be.
I am a very happy guy right now. I thought this morning when I climbed into my boat it was going to take a miracle to move into that top 50 from 116th place, and miracles happened. I went out today and things just went right. I caught a couple of big largemouths first thing in the morning on a topwater plug, and then I went to my cranking pattern and it played out just the way it was supposed to. Weighed in over 10 pounds, moved from 116th place to 45th place, made the top 50, and I get to take another run at them tomorrow. That Classic is not out of hand yet. I'm ready to go after them. Not enough. Stumped my toe the first day, and I'm going to pay for it.
Show me Joe Thomas from Cincinnati, Ohio. Joe, 4 bass, 1 shy of the limit.
Yeah, Fish, I just didn't get enough today. You know, I had a good day yesterday.
Let me get a weight of 4 pounds and 13 ounces.
You know, I could have had a real big day, and I tried to duplicate it today. I tried to run the tide and do the things exactly this way I did yesterday, and I guess the clear skies, the largemouth just didn't bite for me. I could not get a bite. And right at the end of the day, I ran north, and I caught those 4 little fish right there, just out of desperation, really. You know, but you know, it's been a good year. I said here with 3 tournaments to make the Classic, a guy can't have a bad day. And I had a bad day on the first day. I only had 2 pounds, and that's going to be the difference of probably making the Classic. Now I came here in 4th place.
By all indications, it looks like I'm going to finish about 7th, possibly 8th for the year. That's going to be about 2 spots out of the Classic. And it's a little disappointing, but it's also it's a relief to have it over with. You know, it's been a very stressful event. You know, having a bad first day and then a real emotional roller coaster, coming back and catching a big stringer and making the cut the second day and having a chance to go out and at least have the opportunity to go out and make a play for it on the final day, and it just didn't come together for me. But overall, I feel like this fall has been a good season for me. You know, I've made a lot of good decisions. I fell one day short. I had a bad first day of this event. 1 day out of 9, I really bought the farm, and that's going to be the difference between making the Classic and not. But the tour's still around the corner. We're going to be starting back up in January, and, you know, 35 fishermen from the tour are going to go to the Classic, but I sure would have liked to have made it before Christmas. That would have been a great deal. But, you know, just pack up and suck it up and